The psychology of home. You turn the key in the lock, step across the threshold, and feel it immediately. That subtle yet profound shift in your being as you cross from the public world into your private domain. Perhaps your shoulders drop slightly, your breath deepens, or your thoughts begin to flow in different patterns. This transition, this psychological boundary crossing, represents one of the most powerful yet often overlooked environmental experiences in your daily life. Your home is not merely a physical structure providing shelter from the elements, but a psychological territory that fundamentally shapes your emotional state, cognitive functioning, relationship dynamics, and even your sense of self. The walls that surround you do far more than block wind and rain. They create the container within which much of your most intimate psychological experience unfolds, a place where you can, ideally, fully inhabit both your space and yourself. In this chapter, we'll explore the profound relationship between home environments and psychological well-being, examining how your living space functions as both territory and refuge, identifying the key psychological needs home environments fulfill, discovering strategies for creating more supportive domestic spaces, and understanding how homes both reflect and shape your deepest values and identity. Through this exploration, you'll gain insight into creating living spaces that genuinely nurture, rather than merely house your psychological life. Home as psychological territory and refuge. The concept of home operates at the intersection of two fundamental psychological needs: territory, the claim to space under your control, and refuge, protection from external threats and stressors. These twin aspects work in concert to create what environmental psychologists call ontological security, a sense of order, continuity, and reliable sanctuary that forms the foundation for psychological well-being in an often unpredictable world. The territorial imperative. Your need for territory isn't a social convention, but a biological imperative woven into your neural architecture through millennia of evolution. Research in evolutionary psychology suggests that territorial behaviors, claiming, marking, and defending space, appear consistently across human cultures because they served crucial survival functions for our ancestors. Having reliable access to a defined area reduced conflict, conserved energy that would otherwise be spent in constant boundary negotiation, and created predictable zones for rest, sustenance, and social bonding. Brown, 2009. This evolutionary background helps explain why territorial disruption, whether through forced relocation, invasion of privacy, or loss of control over your living space, typically triggers powerful stress responses operating through ancient pathways in your limbic system. When strangers enter your home without permission or institutional powers dictate changes to your living environment, you're not merely annoyed, but biologically alarmed through mechanisms that long predate modern housing arrangements. Research conducted at Northwestern University found that even temporary territorial disruption in residential settings, such as maintenance workers entering apartments without adequate notice, triggered measurable increases in cortisol levels among residents. Roster et al., 2016. These stress responses occurred regardless of whether any actual negative event took place, suggesting that territorial violation itself, rather than specific consequences, creates physiological distress. The psychological importance of territory manifests through what environmental psychologists call primary territorial behaviors, actions that establish, maintain, and communicate spatial ownership. When you arrange furniture according to your preferences, display meaningful objects, or establish household rules, you're engaging in territoriality that serves crucial psychological functions beyond mere self-expression. Primary territories, spaces under your consistent control where you set the rules of access and behavior, provide what psychologists call environmental self-efficacy, the confidence that you can successfully manage your surroundings. This territorial confidence ripples through other aspects of psychological functioning, supporting emotional regulation, identity consolidation, and cognitive restoration that depend on the predictability and control that established territory provides. The refuge function. Complementing your need for territory is the equally powerful need for refuge, a protected space allowing relaxation of the vigilance and self-regulation demands that social environments typically require. Your home ideally provides what sociologist Irving Goffman, 1959, called a backstage area, where you can step out of public performances and social masks to experience psychological restoration unavailable in more exposed settings. The refuge function operates through several distinct psychological mechanisms: boundary regulation, the ability to control access, interaction, and observation, allows what psychologists call attentional restoration. In public environments, your attention continuously manages social monitoring, impression management, and navigational demands that gradually deplete cognitive resources. Home environments ideally permit the relaxation of these attentional requirements, allowing recovery of depleted cognitive capacity through boundary control that limits interaction demands. A study at the University of California found that people who perceived their homes as offering adequate privacy showed approximately 23% better performance on attentional tasks following work compared to those reporting inadequate privacy at home, despite equivalent work demands. Hardig et al. In 2003. This finding suggests that the refuge quality of home directly influences cognitive recovery independently from other restoration factors. Sensory calibration, the capacity to regulate sensory input, represents another crucial refuge function. Public environments typically present what sensory researchers call non-negotiable stimulation, sensory input you cannot control or modify, despite its potential mismatch with your current needs or preferences. Home environments ideally provide what design psychologists call sensory agency, the ability to adjust lighting, sound levels, temperature, and other sensory variables according to your changing requirements. This sensory agency creates what neuroscientists call stimulus-consistent processing states, neural activity patterns appropriately matched to current needs rather than continuously adapting to misaligned environmental conditions. When your surroundings allow sensory self-regulation, your nervous system can establish optimal states for current priorities rather than compromising between environmental demands and internal needs. Self-expression safety, the freedom to behave without continuous social judgment, forms a third critical refuge dimension. Public environments typically impose what social psychologists call presentation taxation, the ongoing energy expenditure required to maintain socially appropriate behaviors and emotional displays regardless of your authentic experience. Home environments ideally permit presentational relief where this taxation ceases, allowing emotional authenticity unavailable in settings requiring continuous impression management. Research demonstrates that this behavioral freedom provides not merely comfort, but essential psychological maintenance. Studies at the University of Michigan found that people who felt unable to fully be themselves within their homes showed significantly higher levels of what psychologists call emotional labor residue, the accumulated stress from ongoing self-presentation that, when unrelieved, contributes to burnout, mood disturbances, and relationship difficulties. Grandi Gabriel, 2015. The territorial refuge balance. The most psychologically supportive homes strike a balance between territory and refuge functions, creating what environmental psychologists call secure bases from which you can confidently engage with the wider world. Like the secure attachment relationships identified in developmental psychology, secure environmental bases provide both protection when needed and confident launching points for exploration and engagement. This balance manifests differently across individuals and cultures, reflecting diverse psychological needs and social contexts. Research indicates that approximately 15 to 20% of the population demonstrates what psychologists call high environmental sensitivity, experiencing both challenges and environmental influences with particular intensity. Aaron et al. In 2012. These individuals typically require more robust refuge qualities in their homes to manage the heightened stimulation they experience in public settings. Cultural variations similarly influence territorial refuge preferences. Studies show that cultures with traditionally higher population density generally develop home environments with more defined internal boundaries and clearer transition rituals between public and private spaces. Altman-Kemmers, 1984. These patterns likely reflect adaptive responses to social density, creating psychological territory through symbolic and behavioral means when physical space remains limited. Despite these variations, cross-cultural research confirms the universal importance of some form of territorial refuge balance for psychological well-being. When either function becomes severely compromised, whether through overcrowding eliminating privacy, institutional controls undermining territorial authority, or isolation creating refuge without meaningful territory, significant psychological stress typically follows, manifesting through both emotional and physiological pathways. Key psychological functions of home environments. Beyond territory and refuge, home environments serve several specific psychological functions essential for human flourishing. Understanding these functions allows more conscious creation of living spaces that genuinely support rather than inadvertently undermine psychological well-being. Research identifies several primary psychological functions that home environments distinctively fulfill: identity anchor and continuity support. Your home provides what environmental psychologists call physical autobiography, a tangible expression of your life story through objects, arrangements, and accumulated modifications that collectively create chronological coherence and identity reinforcement unavailable through purely mental processes. Research in autobiographical memory demonstrates that home environments support what psychologists call self-continuity through both intentional mementos and incidental physical traces that connect your present self to your past experiences. The bookshelf containing volumes acquired across decades, the gradually assembled kitchen tools reflecting evolving interests, the wall marks tracking children's growth. These environmental elements create physical manifestations of your temporal journey that reinforce identity despite life's continuous changes. This anchoring function proves particularly valuable during major life transitions, when other identity supports may shift or disappear. Studies show that maintaining certain environmental continuity elements during relocation, specific furniture pieces, meaningful objects, familiar arrangements, significantly reduces what psychologists call transition stress by providing physical continuity bridges that support psychological adaptation through environmental familiarity during otherwise substantial change. Brown et al. 2012. The identity anchoring function operates through both conscious and non-conscious pathways. Beyond deliberate keepsakes and intentional displays, research demonstrates that what environmental psychologists call tacit anchors, habitual interaction patterns with familiar elements like the specific feel of your doorknob, the distinctive sound of your floorboards, or the particular way light falls through your windows, create powerful continuity experiences operating largely below conscious awareness. These tacit anchors help explain why environmental disruption, even when involving seemingly minor changes, can create disproportionate psychological disturbance. When renovation or relocation alters these non-conscious environmental patterns, you may experience what psychologists call environmental grief that may seem objectively disproportionate because it involves largely implicit, rather than explicitly recognized relationships with environmental elements that quietly supported your psychological continuity. Relationship facilitation and regulation. Home environments profoundly shape relationship dynamics through what sociologists call behavioral setting effects, the tendency for physical arrangements to consistently influence interaction patterns, regardless of conscious intentions. Your home's design doesn't merely accommodate relationships, but actively shapes their quality through spatial arrangements that either support or hinder different relationship needs. Research identifies several specific dimensions through which home environments influence relationship functioning. Interaction calibration, the ability to modulate engagement levels, depends significantly on what designers call sociopedal and sociofugal arrangements. Sociopedal spaces draw people together through seating orientations, traffic patterns, and activity zoning that create natural gathering. Sociofugal spaces support separation through physical distance, visual barriers, or acoustic properties that facilitate individual activities without interference. Studies demonstrate that homes lacking adequate balance between these arrangements show approximately 25 to 30% more reported relationship conflict compared to homes with more balanced interaction options. Osland-Donald, 1993. This finding suggests that spatial constraints on togetherness-separation regulation directly impact relationship quality independently from interpersonal factors. Territorial respect, the acknowledgement of individual space needs within shared environments, represents another crucial relationship dimension influenced by home design. Research shows that what environmental psychologists call secondary territories within homes, areas primarily controlled by specific individuals, though not exclusively their domain, significantly predict family satisfaction and conflict levels regardless of overall space availability. These personal territories function through what boundary researchers call recognized zones of influence, rather than requiring complete separation. Studies indicate that even modest acknowledgement of individual territorial claims, a favorite chair, a personal shelf, a desk area primarily respected as someone's domain, substantially reduces territorial friction compared to environments where all space remains continuously contested or undifferentiated. Activity support, the accommodation of different simultaneous functions, influences relationship quality through what sociologists call functional conflict management. When home environments provide inadequate separation between incompatible activities, focused work alongside loud entertainment, sleep areas adjacent to activity zones, they create what researchers call environmentally imposed friction that often manifests as interpersonal conflict, despite originating from spatial rather than relational factors. Research at Cornell University found that family homes designed with what architects call acoustic zoning, arrangements separating noise generating from quiet requiring activities through layout planning rather than merely square footage, reported approximately 18% fewer noise-related conflicts compared to homes with equivalent space but poor acoustic separation. Hedge, 2000. This finding highlights how thoughtful environmental design can reduce relationship friction that might otherwise be misattributed to personality conflicts or communication problems. Restoration and stress regulation. Perhaps the most thoroughly documented psychological function of home environments involves restoration. The ability to recover from stress, attentional fatigue, and emotional depletion accumulated through daily challenges. Your home ideally provides what restoration researchers call psychophysiological regulation opportunities that help recalibrate your nervous system and cognitive functioning after external demands. Research identifies several specific restoration pathways operating through home environments. Sleep quality represents the most fundamental restoration function, with research demonstrating powerful connections between bedroom environmental characteristics and sleep architecture. Studies using polysomnography, comprehensive sleep measurement, show that bedrooms designed with appropriate darkness, sound control, temperature regulation, and air quality support approximately 12 to 18% better deep sleep duration compared to environments lacking these qualities. Kaddick et al. In 2018. This sleep quality difference creates cascading effects throughout psychological functioning, as deep sleep stages provide what neuroscientists call targeted system restoration essential for emotional regulation, cognitive performance, and stress hormone management. When home environments compromise these sleep stages through environmental disruptions, the consequences extend far beyond subjective tiredness to include measurable degradation across multiple psychological functions. Attention restoration provides another crucial recovery pathway, with research demonstrating that appropriate home environments support what psychologists call directed attention recovery, the replenishment of depleted focus resources essential for executive functioning. Studies show that homes incorporating restoration-supporting elements, particularly natural views, appropriate complexity levels, and defined activity zones, facilitate significantly better attention recovery compared to environments lacking these qualities. Kaplan, 2001. This attention restoration appears particularly dependent on what researchers call fascination opportunities, environmental elements that engage attention gently without demanding effort. Natural elements like indoor plants, window views of vegetation, and nature-based artwork prove especially effective, creating what attention researchers call soft fascination that allows cognitive systems to replenish while maintaining enough engagement to prevent rumination. Emotional regulation support represents a third restoration dimension, with research showing that appropriate home environments facilitate what psychologists call environmental mood management, the use of physical surroundings to support emotional processing and regulation. Studies demonstrate that homes designed with emotional regulation in mind, providing both stimulation and calm options, supporting sensory self-regulation, and offering appropriate privacy for emotional expression, show stronger associations with psychological resilience than environments focused primarily on aesthetic or functional considerations. Corpella et al., 2018. This regulation support operates through what emotion researchers call environmental affordances for specific regulation strategies. Different emotional regulation approaches, whether reappraisal, distraction, social sharing, or private processing, require different environmental supports. Homes providing diverse options across these dimensions support more flexible and effective emotional management compared to environments that constrain regulation choices through limited environmental variety. Creating a supportive home environment. Understanding the psychological functions of home environments allows more intentional creation of living spaces aligned with genuine well-being rather than merely following design trends or functional considerations that might inadvertently undermine psychological needs. Research suggests several evidence-based approaches for enhancing the psychological supportiveness of your home. Personal territory establishment. Creating appropriate territorial definition represents a foundational element of psychologically supportive homes, regardless of size or ownership status. Research demonstrates that even in space-constrained or temporary living situations, territorial clarity provides significant psychological benefits through increased environmental control perception. Several evidence-based strategies support effective territorial establishment. Boundary definition using what designers call transition markers, elements clearly signaling shifts between different functional or personal territories, significantly enhances territorial clarity without requiring physical separation. Research shows that even symbolic boundaries, changes in flooring material, lighting shifts, furniture arrangements creating implied thresholds, activate what neuroscientists call territorial recognition patterns that support psychological ownership despite limited physical separation. Gosling et al. 2005. These markers function through what cognitive scientists call schema activation, triggering mental frameworks that guide behavior and expectations without requiring conscious analysis. When you cross a threshold marked by a rug edge, lighting change, or furniture grouping, your brain registers a territory shift before conscious recognition, automatically adjusting behavior patterns according to the territory's psychological function. Personalization through what environmental psychologists call identity markers, elements that communicate personal presence and preferences, significantly strengthens territorial ownership perceptions. Research demonstrates that spaces containing even modest personal elements, photographs, meaningful objects, chosen colors, or textures, create approximately 15 to 20% stronger territorial satisfaction compared to functionally identical but impersonal alternatives. Wells, 2000. These identity markers work through what psychologists call environmental autobiography, creating tangible confirmation of your presence and influence within a space. The psychological benefits extend beyond mere preference satisfaction to include what identity researchers call environmental self-verification, the reassurance that comes from surroundings reflecting and confirming important aspects of your self-concept. Control features providing what designers call environmental adjustment capacity, elements you can modify according to changing needs, substantially enhance territorial satisfaction regardless of absolute space control. Research shows that incorporating adjustable elements, furniture that can be rearranged, lighting with dimming capabilities, window coverings permitting varying transparency, significantly increases perceived territorial ownership compared to more fixed arrangements, even when overall decision authority remains equivalent. Augustin, 2009. These control opportunities provide what psychologists call environmental negotiation capacity, the ability to modify surroundings to better align with changing needs rather than forcing continuous adaptation to fixed conditions. Even modest adjustment capabilities, the ability to open windows, rearrange objects, or modify lighting, create disproportionate psychological benefits by transforming passive environmental occupancy into active territory management. Multisensory harmony. Beyond territorial considerations, research increasingly recognizes the importance of what environmental psychologists call sensory ecology, the holistic sensory experience created by combined environmental influences across all perceptual channels. A growing body of evidence suggests that sensory harmony, alignment between different sensory inputs rather than optimization of isolated sensory dimensions, significantly determines home psychological quality. Several sensory dimensions deserve particular attention. Light quality represents perhaps the most influential sensory factor in home environments, with research demonstrating profound effects on everything from circadian regulation to mood and cognitive function. Studies show that homes designed around what lighting researchers call dynamic daylight utilization, maximizing natural light while providing appropriate control over intensity and timing, demonstrate significantly better outcomes on measures of resident well-being compared to environments relying primarily on artificial illumination regardless of intensity or spectrum. Boubekri et al., 2014. Beyond absolute light levels, research highlights the importance of what lighting designers call lighting modifiability, the ability to adjust light characteristics according to changing activities and needs. Studies demonstrate that homes incorporating lighting variety, different intensity options, adjustable directionality, variable color temperature capabilities, show stronger associations with resident satisfaction than environments with uniformly optimal but inflexible lighting regardless of absolute quality. Particularly strong benefits emerge from what circadian researchers call time-appropriate lighting, illumination matching natural daylight patterns that helps maintain healthy circadian rhythms. Morning exposure to bright blue-rich light, followed by gradual transition toward warmer, dimmer evening illumination, helps synchronize internal clocks with natural cycles, supporting both sleep quality and daytime energy in ways that even high-quality but temporally inappropriate lighting cannot provide. Acoustic quality significantly influences both psychological comfort and cognitive functioning, with research demonstrating that appropriate sound environments support everything from stress regulation to relationship satisfaction. Studies show that homes incorporating what acoustic designers call sound scenography, thoughtful attention to the complete sound environment beyond mere noise reduction, demonstrate stronger restoration capacity than environments focused solely on sound minimization, regardless of absolute quietness achieved. This scenography approach recognizes that optimal acoustic environments involve not just limiting unwanted sounds, but creating what sound researchers call positive sonic affordances, beneficial sound elements that actively support psychological functioning. Research indicates that homes incorporating appropriate positive sounds, whether flowing water features, gentle nature sounds, or specific music chosen for restoration properties, show enhanced relaxation capacity compared to equally quiet environments lacking these positive acoustic elements. Particular benefits emerge from what acoustic ecologists call restorative soundscapes, sound environments supporting psychological restoration through specific characteristics. Research identifies several key qualities in such soundscapes: foreground-background balance, providing interest without demanding attention; temporal structure, offering predictable patterns without monotony; and information content, providing reassurance without creating processing demands. Tactile quality represents an increasingly recognized but often overlooked sensory dimension, with research demonstrating significant psychological effects from what haptic researchers call touch landscapes, the combined tactile experiences created by material choices, temperature variations, and textural diversity within home environments. Studies show that homes incorporating thoughtful tactile elements demonstrate stronger restoration capacity than environments focused primarily on visual aesthetics, despite equivalent visual appeal. The psychological impact of tactile environments operates through what neuroscientists call cross-modal sensory confirmation, the neural integration of touch experiences with visual and other sensory inputs that either reinforces or contradicts perceptual expectations. When materials feel exactly as they appear they should feel, they create what researchers call perceptual coherence that reduces cognitive processing demands, allowing more complete relaxation through eliminated need to reconcile contradictory sensory information. Creating tactile quality involves attention to what designers call interaction surfaces, areas where direct physical contact regularly occurs. Research indicates that surfaces encountered through direct touch, flooring beneath bare feet, furniture supporting seated bodies, fabrics contacting skin, handles and controls manipulated by hands, create particularly significant tactile impressions that influence overall environmental perception beyond their proportional physical presence. Psychological zoning. Beyond specific sensory considerations, research demonstrates the importance of what environmental psychologists call psychological zoning, organizing home environments around distinct psychological functions rather than merely practical activities. This approach recognizes that different psychological states require different environmental supports, creating what designers call mood-aligned spaces that actively facilitate specific psychological needs, rather than serving as neutral containers for activities. Several zoning approaches demonstrate particular psychological value. Restoration zones designed specifically to support recovery from stress, attentional fatigue, and emotional depletion represent perhaps the most crucial psychological zoning element. Research shows that homes incorporating deliberate restoration areas, spaces specifically organized around recovery rather than productivity or entertainment, demonstrate significantly stronger associations with resident well-being than environments lacking these dedicated recovery spaces regardless of overall quality or size. Corpela-Hartig, 1996. Effective restoration zones typically incorporate specific characteristics identified through research. Sensory retreat providing relief from overstimulation through appropriate sound control, light modulation, and minimal visual complexity. Prospect refuge balance offering both protective enclosure and visual connection to broader surroundings, and natural elements providing the established restoration benefits associated with biophilic features. These zones need not require substantial space but depend more on what designers call psychological clarity, Clear differentiation from areas serving other functions that helps activate specific mental frameworks supporting restoration. Research demonstrates that even modest areas can provide significant restoration benefits when clearly distinguished from productivity or social spaces through thoughtful boundary definition and distinct sensory qualities. Focus-supporting zones designed to facilitate concentrated attention represent another valuable psychological zoning element, particularly as home environments increasingly serve work and learning functions beyond traditional domestic activities. Research shows that homes incorporating dedicated concentration spaces, areas specifically organized to support sustained attention, show stronger associations with productive satisfaction than environments where focus activities must occur in spaces primarily designed for other psychological functions. Evans-McCoy, 1998. Effective focus zones typically incorporate characteristics identified through cognitive research, distraction limitation, minimizing both visual and auditory interruptions through appropriate positioning and boundaries. Appropriate stimulation levels providing enough environmental interest to prevent boredom without creating attention competition. And functional completeness, ensuring necessary resources remain readily available without requiring focus-breaking transitions to other areas. The psychological effectiveness of these zones depends significantly on what cognitive researchers call attention compatibility, alignment between environmental characteristics and the specific type of focus required. Different cognitive activities benefit from different environmental supports, with creative ideation typically functioning better in spaces with more sensory richness and visual prospect, while detail-oriented analytical work typically benefits from more controlled sensory conditions with limited environmental variables. Social calibration zones designed to support different interaction intensities represent a third valuable psychological zoning approach. Research demonstrates that homes incorporating what sociologists call interaction gradient options, spaces supporting different levels of social engagement, show stronger associations with relationship satisfaction than environments offering less interaction variability, regardless of overall social functionality. Hall, 1966. Effective social calibration involves creating what designers call engagement option spectrum, a range of spaces supporting different interaction intensities, from high engagement gathering areas to intermediate socializing spaces to low-key connection zones. This spectrum allows relationship interactions to match current needs and capacities, rather than forcing either intense togetherness or complete separation when intermediate engagement might better serve psychological needs. Research indicates that social calibration zones function most effectively when incorporating what communication researchers call interaction legibility, clear environmental cues indicating appropriate interaction intensity. When spaces visibly communicate their intended social function through arrangement, lighting, and other environmental signals, they create what sociologists call behavioral setting consistency that reduces the social negotiation required to establish appropriate interaction levels. Meaningful personalization. Beyond functional considerations, research increasingly recognizes the psychological importance of what environmental psychologists call meaning-based customization. Modifications that connect home environments to personal values, history, and aspirations, rather than merely aesthetic or functional preferences. Studies demonstrate that homes incorporating meaningful personalization show significantly stronger associations with psychological well-being than environments focusing primarily on visual appeal or functional optimization, regardless of objective quality. Several personalization approaches demonstrate particular psychological value. Memory anchoring through what researchers call autobiographical environmental reference, elements connecting spaces to significant life experiences, creates powerful psychological benefits through both conscious reflection and non-conscious familiarity. Research shows that homes incorporating meaningful memory connections demonstrate stronger associations with measures of psychological continuity than environments focused primarily on current preferences, regardless of aesthetic alignment. Marcus, 2006. These memory elements function through what neuroscientists call episodic memory reinforcement, strengthening autobiographical recall through environmental cues that repeatedly activate important memories during daily activities. Unlike photographs viewed occasionally or mementos stored away, environmental elements encountered regularly during routine activities create what memory researchers call continuous autobiographical rehearsal that strengthens life narrative coherence through ongoing environmental reminder. Value expression through what environmental psychologists call principal manifesting elements, aspects of home environments that embody personal values, significantly enhances psychological coherence. Research demonstrates that homes incorporating features aligned with residents' core values, whether environmental sustainability, cultural heritage, creative expression, or other central principles, show stronger associations with measures of psychological authenticity compared to environments reflecting only aesthetic or functional considerations. Gosling et al., 2008. This value alignment operates through what psychologists call value-behavior consistency support, environmental elements that facilitate living in accordance with important values rather than contradicting them through implicit messages or practical barriers. When your surroundings embody rather than undermine your values, they create what integrity researchers call reduced dissonance living that supports psychological coherence by eliminating the subtle tension created when daily environments contradict important principles. Relationship representation through what sociologists call connection manifesting elements, aspects of home environments that embody important relationships, creates significant psychological benefits beyond merely displaying photographs or storing correspondence. Research shows that homes incorporating environmental elements connecting to important relationships, whether preserved children's artwork, objects gifted by loved ones, or spaces specifically designed around shared activities, demonstrate stronger associations with measures of belongingness than environments focused primarily on individual preferences. These relationship elements function through what attachment researchers call expanded connection pathways, physical manifestations of important bonds that maintain psychological presence even during physical absence. Unlike digital communication that requires specific attention, environmental relationship elements create what connection researchers call ambient social presence that maintains relational awareness through ongoing environmental encounters during routine activities. Home as expression of identity and values. Beyond meeting specific psychological needs, your home represents perhaps your most comprehensive opportunity for what environmental psychologists call extended self-expression, the manifestation of identity beyond physical boundaries into environmental elements that both reflect and reinforce your sense of self. Research increasingly recognizes that homes function not merely as containers for self-expression, but as active participants in identity formation and maintenance through continuous environmental feedback. The reflexive relationship between self and space. Environmental psychologists describe the relationship between identity and home as reflexive, a continuous reciprocal influence where environments both express and shape who you are through ongoing interaction. This reflexive relationship operates through what identity researchers call environmental dialectic, the continuous conversation between self and surroundings that gradually aligns these elements through mutual adaptation. Research demonstrates this reflexive quality through studies of what psychologists call environmental congruence, the alignment between personal characteristics and home environments. Longitudinal studies show that this congruence typically increases over time through two simultaneous processes: selective modification, changing environments to better reflect existing identity aspects, and environmental socialization, gradual identity shifts influenced by persistent environmental characteristics. This reflexive relationship helps explain why home environments often predict future behavior and attitude changes more accurately than self-reported intentions. When you modify your environment to better support particular activities or values, research shows that you subsequently engage more frequently in those activities and demonstrate stronger commitment to those values through what psychologists call environmental facilitation effects, the tendency for surroundings to enable and therefore encourage specific behaviors through reduced friction. The depth of this self-environment connection emerges clearly in research on what psychologists call place attachment disruption, the psychological effects of losing significant environments through relocation, natural disaster, or other forced changes. Studies show that such disruptions often trigger grief responses neurologically similar to relationship loss, reflecting what attachment researchers call environmental incorporation, the psychological integration of significant places into identity structures. This integration explains why environmental changes sometimes create what psychologists call identity threat, challenges to self-concept stability that trigger protective responses. When environments embodying important identity aspects face significant modification, research shows elevated anxiety and resistance regardless of practical implications, reflecting what identity researchers call environmental self-investment. the extension of self-concept into physical surroundings that makes environmental changes personally threatening rather than merely practically inconvenient. Cultural and social dimensions of home identity. While home environments express individual identity, they simultaneously connect to what sociologists call collective identity dimensions, aspects of self derived from group memberships, cultural heritage, and social positioning. Research demonstrates that homes often function as what cultural psychologists call identity negotiation zones, where individual expressions interact with broader cultural and social influences. This negotiation becomes particularly evident in what researchers call cultural display choices, decisions about which heritage elements to incorporate into home environments. Studies show that these choices reflect complex identity management strategies rather than simple preference expressions, representing what sociologists call cultural identity calibration, the ongoing process of determining which heritage aspects to emphasize, adapt, or minimize through environmental manifestation. Research demonstrates that home environments frequently serve what sociologists call bridging functions between different identity aspects that might otherwise remain disconnected. This bridging occurs through what designers call integration elements, environmental features combining influences from different heritage sources or identity dimensions into coherent expressions that create what psychologists call identity synthesis opportunities, possibilities for unifying potentially conflicting self-aspects through their simultaneous environmental manifestation. The social dimension of home identity emerges clearly in research on what sociologists call class-coded environmental elements, home features carrying social position signals independent from resident awareness or intention. Studies show that these elements often operate through what researchers call tacit status communication, unspoken but widely recognized indicators embedded in seemingly neutral choices like furniture styles, material selections, or spatial arrangements that collectively create environmental sociolects analogous to linguistic patterns signaling social positioning. Research demonstrates significant psychological consequences from alignment or misalignment between intended and perceived identity signals. When home environments successfully communicate desired identity aspects, they create what psychologists call identity verification satisfaction, the reassurance emerging when others perceive you as you wish to be seen. Conversely, when environments send unintended signals, they create what sociologists call identity misalignment stress, the tension resulting from being perceived in ways contradicting intended self-presentation. Intentional environmental alignment. Understanding the identity dimensions of home environments allows more conscious creation of what environmental psychologists call identity congruent spaces, surroundings intentionally aligned with important self-aspects rather than accidentally contradicting them through unconsidered choices. Research demonstrates that such alignment significantly enhances both psychological well-being and environmental satisfaction compared to equivalent spaces lacking this congruence. Several approaches support more intentional alignment. Value clarification represents an essential starting point, with research demonstrating that explicitly identifying core values before making environmental decisions significantly increases what psychologists call satisfaction durability, the tendency for satisfaction to persist rather than quickly diminishing after initial novelty fades. Studies show that home modifications based on articulated values show approximately 15 to 20% greater long-term satisfaction compared to changes based primarily on aesthetic trends or momentary preferences, Becker, 2018. This clarification process involves what values researchers call priority discernment, identifying which principles matter most when trade-offs become inevitable. Research demonstrates that environments attempting to satisfy too many competing values simultaneously often create what psychologists call dilution effects, weakened impact across all dimensions compared to spaces with clearer priority hierarchies that create more definitive expressions of fewer values. Narrative integration provides another powerful alignment approach, with research showing that homes incorporating what environmental psychologists call life story elements, features connecting to meaningful personal narrative, demonstrate significantly stronger identity congruence than environments developed primarily through isolated decisions without overarching narrative consideration. This narrative approach creates what identity researchers call environmental coherence, a sense that surroundings tell an integrated story rather than presenting disconnected elements. Studies show that such coherence significantly enhances both psychological comfort and environmental attachment through what cognitive scientists call pattern recognition satisfaction, the psychological pleasure derived from perceiving meaningful connections rather than random assemblages. Honesty in expression represents perhaps the most fundamental alignment principle, with research demonstrating that homes embodying what designers call authentic representation, surroundings genuinely reflecting actual rather than aspirational characteristics, show significantly stronger associations with psychological well-being than environments attempting to project idealized images regardless of aesthetic appeal or impression management success. This authenticity operates through what psychologists call cognitive environmental congruence, alignment between mental self-concept and physical surroundings that reduces what researchers call maintaining incongruence costs, the continuous psychological effort required to reconcile contradictions between self-understanding and environmental expressions. When your surroundings honestly reflect who you are, they create what authenticity researchers call reduced presentation taxation, freedom from the subtle but persistent strain of maintaining environments misaligned with actual identity. The journey toward more intentional home environments doesn't require dramatic transformation, but gradual alignment through what designers call intentional evolution, the process of making each modification decision with conscious consideration of identity implications, rather than merely practical or aesthetic factors. Research shows that even modest changes made with clear identity intention significantly enhance environmental satisfaction, compared to more substantial modifications lacking this alignment consideration. Conclusion: the ongoing dialogue. As we conclude our exploration of home psychology, remember that creating nurturing domestic environments isn't about achieving some perfect end state, but establishing an ongoing dialogue between yourself and your surroundings. A continuous conversation that evolves as both you and your needs change over time. The most psychologically supportive homes don't exhibit particular design styles or features, but demonstrate thoughtful alignment between environmental elements and resident psychological needs through continuous attentive adjustment. This alignment emerges through what environmental psychologists call iterative approximation, the ongoing process of noticing how spaces affect you, making thoughtful modifications based on these observations, and then reassessing the effects of these changes to inform further refinements. Through this iterative approach, your home gradually becomes not a fixed container, but a responsive partner in your psychological journey, supporting your well-being through environmental conversations that deepen over time. The relationship between yourself and your home represents one of the most fundamental environmental connections in your life, a bond operating through daily interactions that collectively shape your experience in ways both subtle and profound. By bringing greater awareness to this relationship, you transform your home from background setting to active participant in your psychological flourishing, creating surroundings that don't just house your body, but nurture your whole being through environments aligned with your deepest needs. As you move forward, consider approaching your home as not merely a possession but a process, an ongoing creative expression that both reflects and shapes who you are becoming. Through this perspective, even modest environmental changes acquire deeper significance as contributions to the continuously evolving container for your life story, adjustments to the stage upon which your daily experience unfolds, and the sanctuary in which your most authentic self finds both expression and refuge. The true measure of home isn't found in size, style, or status, but in how fully it supports your unique psychological journey through spaces that respond to your particular needs, express your distinct identity, and create the secure base from which you engage with the wider world. Through thoughtful attention to this environmental relationship, you create not just a house, but a true psychological home, a place where your surroundings and your soul exist in harmonious conversation.